Hi, my name is Steve Shipkowski. I'm the Senior Audio Director on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. My role on this project was to oversee everything that was related to sound and audio. So the sound design, hiring the composer, working with the composer, and finding all the licensed music that went into this amazing game. So crafting sounds for games is a very complicated and interesting procedure, because sometimes we will look at certain sounds and you don't have to reinvent things. Like if it's raining, we all know and what we expect rain to sound like. The challenging part for this game is there's a lot of things in space that aren't based on Earth. So creatures, aliens. So where do you start with that? We were very lucky in that we have great sound designers that are obviously really good at coming up with good sounds. But I also worked with a local talent, Le Fabrique des Monstres. It's a group of death metal singers. And I worked with them for a year to just develop all the creature sounds and all the alien languages we would use in the game. Because death metal singers can do a bit more acrobatics with their voice. They're used to really doing aggressive sounds. So they were the perfect palette to work with. And they came in and they brought us some great source material that after that we would pass that to our sound designers, and then they would start listening to what was at the source and going, okay, what could we blend with this to make something unique? So for example, a death metal singer might do some big sound and then maybe we would blend it with like a bear or a lion, and together the two sounds make something unique that becomes our creature. Same with the alien voices. We actually created the alien languages for about 5 different races. So we would take the script in English, and Sebastien, who's one of the main guys that I worked with, would literally translate it into an alien language that he had made up, just so that we would respect the inflections and the tone. So if the guy is asking a question, when the actor came in to do it in alien, they wouldn't just be like making up baby talk on the spot. They have the dialogue that translates to, do you know what time the bus is coming? And if the alien goes, and it follows the inflection, the conversation flows well. But if he's just making stuff up, it's never going to feel legit. So the reason we went with the 80s direction for our licensed music was Marvel had asked us to make this game, put our own stamp on it, give it our own identity. So one of the things to get away from the MCU versions was to say, okay, well, number one, our game's going to have a bit of a different story between Peter and his mom and what happened. And our game's going to jump by 10 years. And where Peter was a kid in the MCU in the 70s, ours is in the 80s. So we felt right away this gave us our own identity. And for music, it gave such good music. I mean, the 70s and 80s for me are the richest decades we've ever had the pleasure of having for music. So many amazing classic albums came out in those 20 years. So to have the 80s as my sandbox to pick music in was almost too much, because there was just so much good music. So it was more of a matter of taking a list of maybe 50, 60 songs and then trying to narrow it down. So myself, with my creative director, Jeff Dugas, I'd often come to him and I'd be like, hey, I want to use this song, or what do you think of this song? And he gave me a lot of freedom. It was more, he was a good sounding board when I wasn't sure. In the end, I found sort of internal rules that helped me decide which songs would make the cut. And often it was like, well, they needed to be fun. They needed to work in the huddle mechanic. And then if I could actually listen to the song and go, I might be able to use this in a cutscene somewhere as well because it serves a certain emotion, then it was almost like, okay, I need to keep this song because it checks all 3 boxes. So if a song didn't check all 3 boxes, that went into one pile. And if a song checked all 3 boxes, it went into another pile. And then I sort of looked at what budget was left and how many more songs I could move around. And I'll just say, none of this would have happened without Randy Eckhart, who was my licensing consultant. And he went out and did all the chasing of the artists and the contracts and getting everybody on board. So, without his help, none of this would have came into the game. It would have been very difficult. So we have a great cast of artists in the game, and I can't wait for people to experience it. So when it comes to the score and how we sort of go about scoring different beats in the game, number one, we identified some major themes that we wanted to support in our game, like the theme of loss, the Guardians theme, which is the big heroic theme. So sort of using, some of the films like Star Wars that use themes very well, and other movies like that, we wanted to try and create that experience over the length of the game, which is hard, like a movie's 2 hours, so it's easy to kind of impress a theme on somebody. 22 hours, it's a lot harder, but we definitely did our best to do that. And then when we're creating music, we sort of look at each map, we sort of identify what is the mood, where are they in the story at this time, what is the mood amongst the Guardians, are they happy, are they celebrating, are they sad? The music needs to reflect that. Sometimes the music has to do some of the emotional lifting to sort of really set the tone or to stage something that hasn't happened yet. For example, I might have some tension music playing because I have an encounter with a creature, an alien coming up. So the music is always working, like it never stops. The music is always like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The music in the game is doing something, whether it's to communicate an emotional expression for yourself, whether it's creating a foreshadowing, whether it's showing you what just happened in the game and now you're getting the emotional response. But the score is definitely the emotional spine of the game. The only thing I'm thinking of is at the end of every combat, we have a combat outro. So Peter Quill spins his guns, and we always have a little music that is sort of the outro of the combat you just had. So anytime we were creating combats, we always had to have like an intro. That's one piece of music. Then the combat, which is the other piece, and then the outro. So they were always scored with that in mind so that we could seamlessly get into combat and then seamlessly get out of the music. I mean, it's great to have all this music in the game, but it all has to really stitch together almost seamlessly, because the minute the music is not stitching right, the player feels it. It's like a bump on the road. When you're on a smooth highway, you're going to feel it. So it's the same thing. So it's our role to constantly, even with the licensed music, I mean, there's times where I would say to the composer, I'm going to go from, let's say, Flock of Seagulls to your score. So let's identify what key is Flock of Seagulls in. Let's make sure the score comes in the same key, or our harmonic key that allows the listener to not go, oh, that was rough. I don't know why I didn't like that. I don't know music, but I know there was something weird there. Even somebody with the basic knowledge of music will feel that. So it's our job to make everything seamless. It's like, when you come into a house and it's a new house and it's been built, you don't want to see where all the joints and the seams are. You want to see clean walls. Well, that's what we're trying to provide sonically. The idea for the Star-Lord band came from somebody on the team who spoke to the creative director, JF, and just casually, and I should find this person and thank them, because it worked out really well for me, but they said, wouldn't it be cool if, the reason he has Star-Lord on his jacket is because it's a band that he loved as a kid. And the minute he told me, I thought it was brilliant, because as a 14-year-old or 15-year-old, I mean, I had Black Sabbath and Motorhead patches on my jacket, and that's how you kind of showed your allegiance to who you walked with. So I thought it made total sense. But then when JF was like, what about if we actually create an album for this band? Now I was really interested, and I was like, okay, this is really getting cool. This sounds really interesting. But I had no idea he was going to give me the task of put that together. So I was happy when he did, and I had to find the right person to work with, because I wasn't going to have time to do this. Like, this would be a full-time job in itself. Like writing an album, like most bands that write an album, they do that and nothing else. I wasn't going to have that time, so I needed to find a partner who had the creativity and the time. So I found my guy in Johan Boudreau, who is a guy I've been working with off and on for 10, 12 years in the company, etc. So we tried one song. He sent me some riffs in that, and I listened to it, and I said, I think I like this one. Let's try with this. I wrote some lyrics and melody. He has his own post-production house, so he has a recording studio. I went to his place. He had recorded all the music. I just came in, recorded the vocals, all the backing vocals and everything. He mixed it. I sat down to JF and I said, listen to this. And he listened to it, and, you know, I was watching him closely and he looked very impressed. And then he's like, man, I love it. And I always assumed I was going to find, you know, some really good rock singer to come in and do this. But when he heard me, he was like, well, who's singing? And I said, well, I did it just so I could sell you the song, you know, so you can hear it. Because if I'm just like, oh, it's going to go like this, it's not the same effect. So I sang the demo, and when he heard it, he was like, that's great, that's you. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, okay, we're not changing it. He goes, it's going to be you. So I was super happy, obviously, as a musician who's been doing this all my life. It was a very exciting opportunity. And I took it very seriously, and I poured my heart into the record. So I hope people enjoy it. Yeah, in the story of the game, there's a band. They don't go into too much detail about the band. I mean, he has a Rolling Stone magazine next to him that has an album review in it. Has a bit of a bio and interview with me. So it's basically myself and Johan that are the band. Like, we're the two guys who wrote it and put it together. Will there be a live band one day? Who knows? Fingers crossed. That would be fun. But for now, it's me and him, and we're just continuing to have fun. So that's a good question. How do we choose which sounds go in? I mean, for sure, I'll be honest, like, for my team, I like to give them a lot of freedom. I feel people do their best work when you're not standing over them and being like, don't do that. Like, nobody likes working in that. So I have certain things that I'm going to be more particular for. So when it comes to, like, the sound of the creatures or the sound of guns or aliens, for sure, like, I'm putting my eyes and my ears on that, and I'm going to be particular until we get it right. For other sounds, like the sound of I don't know, a bottle falls on the floor. I mean, we all know what a bottle falling on the floor should sound like, so I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel on something like that. So I try not to get in the way of the sound designer. I like to let them work and have a lot of freedom. And then what we'll do, for me, I'll be honest, I wish I could give you like a very scientific, like, well, you know, X times pi minus the position of the sun decides what the sound. It's gut. It's literally like years of watching movies, playing games. I trust my inner compass, if that's what we're going to say. And I can tell right away if somebody puts two things on the table, like this yes, this no. If you want an explanation, I can sometimes go into some kind of cosmic physic reason why this one over that one. I mean, I can actually give you a really funny example. Is just recently, I was working with my technical audio director, JS Leblanc, and I was saying, okay, for right here, we need just a small brass sting, like just a meh, you know. And we had two that are playing the exact same notes, exactly the same, but one just had a bit of a different texture to it, you know, like it was just a bit richer. There was a few more brass in it, but they're the same note. And I said, no, not that one, that one. And he's like, because they're so different. And I went, they are. And he was laughing, and he's like, you know, the difference is this much. And I'm like, yeah, but that much, that's the important part to me. And it was a really funny exchange between the two of us, because he's like, why that one and not? It's the same note. And I'm like, yeah, but this one has something that I like that this one doesn't have. I can't explain it more than that. So often it'll come down to that, and just trusting your eyes and your ears. When you see on screen, does the sound, does it pass? You know, like if I look and I see a cat making a dog sound, that's not going to pass. If the cat makes the right sound, you're going to be like, fine. And the brain is already looking at everything else on the screen going, this is great. This is beautiful. I believe it. I buy into this fantasy, you know? So we're selling a fantasy, and it's our job to do the job right, so that we're often sending you deeper into the fantasy, and the job is to not break the fantasy and pull you out of it. So what does it mean for me to work on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy? Well, I grew up as, you know, a kid who spent all his time doing little jobs so I could go to the corner store and buy comic books, Marvel comics, Spider-Man, stuff like this. I was a huge Spider-Man. I can remember just sitting in the backyard and reading comics and being, you know, happy as hell. So for me, my life has often been comic books, rock and roll, all of that fantasy fiction stuff. So being able to work on a project that speaks to me in such a heavy way, as far as, you know, appealing to my sense of creativity and comic books and you know, underdog heroes, which is something I identify with so much. And, you know, being that person who maybe doesn't fit in with the crowd, but you find your own crowd, I can relate to all of that. So it's a very personal thing for me to have worked on this game. I can honestly say I've put every ounce of passion I have into this game. I hope it comes across that way, but it's been a true labor of love for me. And I really felt like this was a chance for me to give something back for all the years of entertainment and pleasure and enjoyment, literature and comics and music, and this type of game in particular, which, like I said, speaks to the whole underdog and the champion. And yeah, it's just really been very personal for me, and I hope people enjoy it, and I hope they feel the passion that went into making it. Getting to do the Star-Lord album, going outside of gaming, I can honestly say I've been playing music since I've been 14 years old. I think I got up on stage to play for the first time when I was 14, and I never stopped. I still play live today. But it's every musician's dream to do a record, you know, and some people are lucky enough to do it. I was never lucky enough to do it. I mean, obviously, technology has changed a lot, and it's a lot easier to do it. And in my day, when I was playing a lot, you had to go into a recording studio and pay a lot of money, and it wasn't as accessible as it is today. But just getting to do a record like this would have been enough. But getting to do it, and then having Marvel put its name on it, and Marvel push it and go behind it and make it part of the game, it's more than I could have hoped for. It's like a dream come true. So I'm just happy to have been a part of it.